All right, so on mine, I'm continuing to work on the turquoise pieces. I have a few lined up here on this curved edge. Some of the pieces do have a little bit of a curve to them on one side, so those are really good to utilize for any area that has a curve or anything kind of circular. Remember, when you are making any kind of curve or circle, you want to start with the smallest pieces to use around the edge to help create almost like a dotted line for creating a curve or a circle, and that will help it not look so boxy and blocky. So bigger pieces like this, I wouldn't necessarily want to use on some of these curved areas. I want to kind of use the smaller pieces to create almost like a little dotted line of them. It'll be a lot more precise that way. And I found a few that have another kind of curve that's not sticking out, it's more sticking in, so it's a bit more of a concave curve. So those work pretty well for anything that has any kind of concave curve. When I do the green for the background area here, I'm going to want to kind of find those kind of pieces in the green that have that kind of curve for that outside area. But for right now, I'm focusing on the turquoise. So these three pieces work pretty well there. So I'm going to add a little bit of glue. So remember, you don't need a whole lot of glue. You just need a tiny little dot, especially on the smaller pieces. So this is more than enough. It's really hard to see that, but that is more than enough for that piece. It's actually spreading out quite a bit, so it might actually be a little too much. We'll find out when I press it down. I'm going to stick that down there, and a little bit is oozing out from underneath. That's fine if it's just a little bit. If you have a whole lot of it, you want to kind of dab it up a little bit with paper towel or napkin or something. But if there's a little bit of glue coming out, that's totally fine. We just want to avoid any large amount of glue that could be filling up all these negative spaces and gaps in between, because that's the area we're going to be filling with grout later. And if it's filled with glue, there won't be any room for the grout. But a little bit's totally fine, as long as it's not completely filling the spaces. If it's not coming up to the level height-wise of the glass, then that's fine. But the less glue you use, the better. It will also help so that it doesn't make your pieces slide around as much. Let's see, that one went just about like that. It's looking a little off. So I just want to make sure I'm making that consistent spacing. Let's see, how did this one fit? Like that. I might have a little bit too much glue happening because they're sliding around quite a bit. I keep shifting. So I'm just going to kind of soak up a little bit of that glue. If there's a whole lot of glue that you have on there, you can always pick up the piece, wipe it off, and stick it back down. There'll still be plenty of glue to glue it down. If you have a lot of excess glue, you just pick it up, wipe it off, and that will be fine. I really want to make sure they're making that curve, so I want them to line up pretty well. That looks good. Now I can start to find some pieces that kind of fit in all these different negative shapes. So any of the space that's left over and these empty spaces, I want to make sure I'm finding pieces that kind of fit in just right with those. So that might work for there. So remember triangles, and there should be quite a few triangle kind of shapes. Usually fit together pretty well if you have one facing upward and then another one facing downward. They have kind of opposite angles that fit together pretty well. So especially if you're creating kind of a flat line on one side, whether that's at the top of your piece or the edge of an area where there's a straight line, that really helps to create that line at the bottom. Doing something kind of similar here because the bottom of my trailer is pretty flat, so I'm utilizing those pieces like that. Not every piece is going to fit perfect together. We want to kind of just find what works best for the overall kind of shape of your area that you're filling, but also how those pieces fit together. So I'm also kind of trying to make a flat line across this area here. But that doesn't quite have a flat enough line. That might work. That goes in there and that goes about there. That'll work pretty well. And on some of the pieces, I know the turquoise and the dark green, a lot of them have different kind of swirly designs of other colors on the backside. So to keep it really consistent, it's for the most part, it's best to keep that side down because sometimes the pieces, the turquoise has white swirls on the backside, but depending on where the piece was and the big sheet of glass that got broken up, that could be entirely white on one side, or it could just be light little swirls. So to keep it consistent, I'm going to keep that side facing down. And a lot of the other colors, you can flip them any which way to make them work. So on the ones that have stuff on the back side, you can always like rotate them around this way. But on ones that are the same on both sides, you can always flip them upside down if that works better, depending on the area you're working on. So I'm gonna glue this piece down. And if you use a small amount of glue, there's a better chance that if you do want to move any piece of glass after it's glued down, you could potentially pull it off of the masonite. If you use a lot of glue, it's pretty much not coming off at all. But if you use just a tiny bit of glue, yeah, it's possible. That fits pretty good there. There's a little bit of a gap in between, but I can probably find another triangle piece to fit that. Maybe something like that. That works pretty well. Could go in there. Should work pretty well there too. Has a bit of a point coming up to where I have a straight line, but it's just a tiny bit, so then I can fit another piece in next to it. That could fit in like that, and then I'm still creating that straight line across here. I'm going to try a few more things to see what works best. That might fit better. All right, and so this piece here, there's quite a bit of glue, so it's kind of shifting a little bit. So I just need to keep checking up on it as it dries. It's starting to dry, so it's not going to move as much now, but it shifted a little bit. So I'm just going to keep an eye on that area as it dries and kind of move it around as needed if it keeps shifting. So it's always a good idea to kind of, once you have some pieces down, kind of check up on what you did earlier as it dries to kind of make sure things aren't moving around. And when it sits on top of that glue, if there's a lot, it likes to shift around.